people have made this show really a possibility. Just to make sure you're in the right talk, the talk I'm going to be delivering in the next 1 hour is going to be on the future of software developers by 2040. This is a talk that I had given a couple of times in the past, and it had got good feedback. So I thought, let me do this again. And in the last 12 months, and rather last 18 months, a lot has happened in the world because of the pandemic. Almost all the entire software development in all the bigger companies, 90 to 95% or even more, is happening from their houses. And because of this, the communication tools have actually been improved a lot more faster. What some of the companies have been telling, what they would have taken in these collaboration tools, something like 3 to 5 years have been cut short into a period of about 12 months. That's the kind of change that has happened. So I thought it's time for me to change this talk and update it. So if you were to call this is like version 3 of this talk, there's a lot of interesting things here. So stay along with me. And if you have any feedbacks, please put it on the chat on YouTube. Let me come back and comment on them later. So what we'll be looking at is how these changes that has happened and the changes that will happen in the next 20 years will impact on the way we develop software. So my name is Venkatrangan Thirumalai. I'm a white space leader, a CEO coach, and I'm a Microsoft regional director for almost 20 years now. I don't work for Microsoft, it's an honorary title. I do work with their customers, partners, and deliver such lectures, the one that you're listening to. What qualifies me to give this particular talk? Okay, so if you're going to be spending the next 1 hour, why should you listen to me? These are my credentials. I've been in the industry for almost like 25 years. I look probably young, but that doesn't mean I haven't had my share of experience in the industry. So I've worked with clients across the globe, and I've had my own business in many countries. I've seen 4 industry cycles, 3 business cycles. What it's taught me is when we as an engineer get into software, we think the tools, the technologies, the coding, that's what is important. But looking at this cycles, the changes that has happened in the industry, I can very well tell you, when a customer asks you to solve a problem, the technology or the coding, those are not the topmost priority for them. The most priority for them is how well you understand their business, how well you're able to solve them. That is the key thing. So with that will be kind of an underlying theme in my talk as well. And those are some of my other things that I've done. So I'll be talking about 4 things, 4 agendas in this talk in the next 45, 50 minutes. First, let me look at what is the job market today for software engineering and what it's likely to be moving forward. What has happened because of the pandemic, the work from home, the remote working and all that. The third will be the technology trends. A lot of AI, ML tools are coming into how we develop software. We'll try to see some of them and maybe a demo. And then lastly, we'll talk about how do you stay relevant in this changing scenario where if there is an industry that is changing more than ever, more faster than any other industry, it is the industry of software engineering. We are the ones who are creating this change. We are the ones who are disrupting the industry, but we are also disrupting the way our own jobs are done. So it's very key to understand what are those changes and how do we stay relevant. I'll give you a clue on how you can stay relevant by something that I call as cola. It's not the Coca-Cola that you drink. It's COLA. Let me explain what it is. So if you stay with me, you can hear what is cola and how do you use it to stay relevant. Let me start with a story. And that's me about 28 years, I suppose, back in my college. Those are my classmates that you see in the picture. And that's our computer science lab. I studied my electronics and communication engineering in a college in Chennai. And these are the old computers, those kind of the CRT monitors and all that. So what we were doing, I think this was in a Pascal lab that we were sitting and we are coding. So Pascal and Fortran were what we had in our syllabus way back in 93, 94 when I studied, and this picture should have been taken. So you had those Turbo Pascal compilers. Okay, I know many of you, or most all of you listening, wouldn't have even seen it. It's those orange or green screen CRT monitors and your Turbo Pascal compiler. And today we call it as pair programming, but in college, as you all know, And especially in those days, you didn't have one computer for every student. So we had two people sharing a computer. So the way it kind of works is, in one of the weeks, I'll be using the computer, and my partner, who comes next in the alphabetical order, he'll be helping me and guiding. And the next week, we'll switch roles and do that kind of the principles that are taken into pair programming. So my classmate who used to sit with me we'll call him UD. So when I keep typing, the way I write code, I try to write the outline, kind of the flow in any language that I program, and then keep filling in the details as we move along. So I'll be just typing a kind of pseudocode, probably in loose Pascal. And UD will next to me keep telling, oh, that's a variable undeclared, or the integer over bound, and so on and so forth. It's like a real-time compilation error that he will be keep giving me. And those days, the tools didn't have those capabilities. This was in MS-DOS. You didn't have even probably multi-threading. So the tools or the frameworks, the compilers didn't have reflections to do what your modern compilers can do. Something like today in your Visual Studio Code, with even simple Python with PyLint, as you keep typing a code, you are going to see both good practices being shown, what are you missing, and also sometimes compiler errors also will be getting in real time. Those are available in today's development tools, but in those days that didn't have. But I had a person sitting next to me, UD, who was able to give it to me. It was irritating. So most often I'll say, I used to call him as compiler, and that name kind of stuck with him for the next 4 years in the college. And I'll say, compiler, just be quiet. Don't give the compiler errors. So the point I'm saying is, those days the tools didn't have it. It was all human intelligence. The coder had to figure out a lot of these things. Otherwise, if you do a mistake, you compile. It's not like your punch card days where you have to wait for hours or days. But then still, it was a couple of minutes before the compiler will start, run, give us the error, and then we'll have to do. But the whole lab will be kind of for 60 minutes or 90 minutes. So, but today, we have very sophisticated tools, and some of them we'll be seeing in the talk as we move along, which can do a lot more interesting things. And that's the progress that we have come in the last 20, 30 years. And that's why it makes me really excited to kind of foresee what's going to happen in the next 20 years. So the first one, this I think pretty much all of us who are listening, you can relate to, especially in the pandemic in the last 18 months. It's very clear, if software is eating the world, the developers are changing the world. It's very clear. We are the ones who are making those new world. Whether it is vaccine development or whether it is diagnosis, even when you go to a COVID test today and you get your reports, at every stage, there is an application, there is a software that is involved. And at the vaccine development, a lot of things like Pfizer had used, and they had written a white paper on the kind of machine language tools that they used so that they could develop this vaccine in months. By the time the virus was discovered in January, they had a working prototype of this vaccine like in April, May. And then they tested it for the next 6 months before Christmas time. They could be giving it to people. And at every stage, software and applications and machine learning was extensively used. They were collecting, like, I think, millions of data points at the virus vaccine manufacturing at the early stages. And even in the trials, the amount of data they were collecting with thousands of their trial patients were humongous. And they couldn't have done it without software and at this speed. So at every stage, developers are involved. Software is involved in today's world. And even at the vaccine rollouts, you have your COVID portal and the certificates, and that's a software that is working like nearly billion people are able to take their vaccines and get certificates within minutes or even seconds because of the COVID software. These are just examples. Everywhere in the world, you have examples that have been done by software and developers. So let's remember that. Keep that at the back of your mind in the next 30, 40 minutes you're listening to this talk. This is a very interesting code. I read from a Microsoft research paper. I'll give you a link at the end. This person, Benson, is a partner researcher. He says, if you think about the world that we are in now, software plays a key role in our lives and everything we do. That's what we saw in the last slide. At the same time, there is also kind of a corollary to that, is that if that is true, then if we make software better, then we are actually making all the things that depend on software better, which means today, if each one of us are able to write a better software, faster software, error-free software, and which solves the business problem better, we are actually solving the world problems. We are helping the world be a better place. It's not a cliche. It's actually today very, very true, because everything is software. And let me just reread the line. If we make software better, we can make all the things that depend on software better. Just very, very key, insightful thoughts there. But at the same time, you look at it, one of the statistics in India says that there are 63 million micro and small medium enterprises in the country. They are the backbone of Indian economy. It's not your large enterprises. It's not your Reliances and Tatas and your Airtels, which actually make up Indian economy. These companies are important, but the ones that are actually ticking India and the ones who are getting back on their feet, one which are helping India to grow again, are these 63 million medium, small, medium enterprises. And they're all probably single, couple, or 10 people companies. And each one of them today are using some kind of software, and they'll be more using it. And even if we have to take that each one of them requires one application, we are talking there needs to be about 63 million applications. It's a not one-to-one correlation, but I'm just making a point here. Millions and millions of software have to be written, apps have to be written for these companies only in India. Do we have those kind of graduates coming out of India every year? We probably are not. There's only 0.9, about a million computer science graduates passing out of Indian colleges today. And some of them go abroad as well. And some of them go to attrition. Some of them go into other industries as well. So from a base of 36 million graduates that India produces across disciplines, we are having only 1 million that come into computer science. Whereas we said there are 63 million applications at the bare minimum that needs by these businesses. Again, some of them may have the application that they wrote last year, they will be using it, but that's, you get the quantum, you get the idea. So what do we do? A lot of new technologies are coming like low code, no code, which we'll try to see later. But the point is there is not enough software engineers out there, which is not surprising. And especially in the growth that all these software companies are making today with your Infosys, TCS, and your Wipros growing in 25-30% year over year. And all these companies hiring in thousands freshers, graduates every year. One of the recent Economic Times articles said about 150,000 fresh graduates are being hired in this financial year alone. Think about that number. It's 1.5 lakh fresh graduates coming in. And HCL, which offered in 2013 Mercedes-Benz for the employees, are again offering that. The attritions, are also big numbers, which we'll see next. But the point is, there is a huge demand of people who can write software. And today is the best time to be in software industry. If any of you have been thinking whether you should be getting into software industry, I think you should, because the next few years is going to be great. This again is statistics from the register. Most of my slides have the link and the reference that I used at the bottom. So when you're listening to this talk later in YouTube, you can actually go back and Google them and find out more information. So these are the top 4 IT service companies in India. And as you can see, the attrition, let's focus on the green columns of the last two. HCL had about 15% and Wipro had about 20%, 20.5%. I read an article today in Economic Times that said Cognizant had about 30%. And that's an interesting term they use also, voluntary LTM. So let's leave those fun of the industry later. But the point is there is about 20 to 30% attrition. So some of that could be due to the pandemic-induced stress, or most of that, when I talk to people in the HR departments of these companies, it is because they have so much opportunity for growth, which you'll also see how the growth happens now. Something that I call as lateral movement, lateral career progression. But the point is that is 30%. And look at the number of freshers being hired in this quarter. It's amazing. About 11,000 freshers hiring new hires that are done in this quarter by HCL alone. You multiply it by 4, that's about 40,000. For TCS, it's about 80,000 people are being hired this year. These are staggering numbers. Okay. But the point, every good thing doesn't last. Good things do come to an end. But in this case, one of the statistics that said, again in Economic Times, that said domestic software firms who employ more than 16 million are going to slash their headcounts massively by 3 million by 2020, which is next year. It's not too far. Okay. And the reason is automation. We'll see more data on why it is so. But they are going to slash their headcounts. At the same time, they are hiring in thousands now. So what's kind of happening? The way they are seeing in the last 18 months, they had such a big of backlog and demand because of pandemic, every business becoming a software one, that they are hiring. At the same time, they are also planning to slash headcounts in the next couple of years because they think the technologies and tools are going to improve productivity, which will mean they can leave the attrition and don't need to backfill those in the coming years. That's what I think will be happening. One other trend which is happening, you can research in that also. A lot of those companies which earlier outsourced to the Indian biggies, Indian IT biggies like your Infosys, TCS, etc., those companies, those MNCs, those American or multinational companies are now, instead of giving it to your TCS and Infosys, are setting up their own global development centers in India. This is a trend that happened in late 90s, kind of went back in the last 10, 15 years, but then it's coming back again now because software is becoming integral to every business, which means they don't want to give their secret. Software is their secret today, and they don't want to give their secret sauces to your IT service companies. They want to do it in-house, and with the AML, which means these algorithms have to work on data, which is very important for these companies, which they don't want outside, and also because the time in which these algorithms can work and give you results and your business impact had to be really, really, really fast. And that you can only do if you are doing it in-house. You can't be outsourcing with a change request, a software requirement document being written and moved around across the world and so on and so forth. That's not going to work. So you have to do in-house, which means there is a lot more employment being available from these companies directly. And there is going to be growth, but which also means not only you need to be good in the software, you also need to understand the business, which is a theme that I'll be covering a little later as well. So what's going to happen? This is a study by McKinsey. Again, the links are available at the bottom. If you look at it, the jobs, this study by McKinsey actually split it into men and women. Okay, there is no bias, but you will get an idea as I move along the slide, you will understand. China is going to be having about 66% of their job, men's job, or jobs in which men are working, going to be displaced by automation by 2030, in the next 10 years. Okay, India is going to be having 44. It's not like we are good. It's still 44% is actually a really 44 million is actually big number for a country like India. And some of these jobs, not all of them obviously are into software development. Some of them, or most of them, will be in your manufacturing and textile and the other industries. If you look at women, about 52 million jobs in China are going to be where women are employed, are going to be displaced by automation. Again, when I use automation, it's not only the technology or development automation or RPAs that we are familiar. It's automation and robotics and so on and so forth. It's not only the RPAs that we are familiar with. India is going to have about 12 million women displaced. Again, if you look detailed into the report, it's not all good news because these 12 million jobs that women are doing are already low-paid jobs. And if they are going to be replaced by automation, those women at the lower strata of society who are finding it difficult to survive, they are going to have a tough time. So this is the reality. As we write these tools that automate and robotics develop, there are going to be jobs that are lost. Okay, which means those people who are able to study and graduate, which is very must, you should get into software so that you can develop these tools. So that's one side of it, what's happening with the job market. Let's switch gears and see what has happened for work from home trend that has happened in the last 12, 18 months. And will it stick as we get out of the pandemic at some point in time? Okay, so this is an interesting statistic. I love statistics. I love these graphs, infograph. It helps you to convey a point a lot more easier and quicker than doing many slides with lots of text. If you see, from May 2020, when the survey was first done, to July 2021, this is for the United States. I'm sure it's going to be very similar to other countries. Probably in India, the manufacturing might show a difference, but then more or less it will give you the same idea, especially in the top jobs, which are more jobs that you do in the office, kind of the white collar jobs. So if you look at the first one, computer and mathematical, that's probably where all the software engineering part comes. If you look at it, in May 2020, 49% of the occupants in the US were working from home. And that's immediately after the pandemic. And that number, 76% has been working for work from home, because that's how the pandemic started and everybody lockdowns and all that. In the last 1.5 years, the number has come down, but not come down drastically. It is at 49%. So still nearly about 50% of people in software development are working in the US, still work from home. And if you take the larger companies like your Microsofts and Google and Facebooks, almost all of them haven't opened their offices yet, or they have opened only for very, very key roles. And that's the trend that we have seen in the last 18 months. What's also happened, this is another way of looking at the data. This is the new job openings that are being posted in Hacker News, which has the keyword both remote and on-site, or if that is the thing you run a query, you look at it in 2012 onwards up to 2020, there was about 20% of the jobs, 20 to 30% of the jobs that said you can work remotely. It's not insignificant, but it hasn't grown significantly, because it was like 15% in 12, and in the last 8 years, it became 30%, kind of double, which is significant, which is substantial, but not as big as what it became because of the lockdowns and all. Today, as on August 2021, 77% of the job postings had the word remote. So which means you can work anywhere from the world, which also means you can apply for a company that's in, say, US only. And earlier you had to have a US visa and all that. Today you can work for that US company sitting in India, sitting in your tier 2, tier 3, or in your village if you have a broadband connectivity. And you can apply for the job and work for them, and probably, hopefully, and I wish I did like that, earn in dollars. Okay, nothing is better than earning in dollars and living in India and spending in rupees. Okay, you could probably go to a country which has a more cost of living, like Sri Lanka or Nepal. You might be even able to save more, but then we'll stick to India. So 77% of the jobs in Hacker News had the keyword remote, and you could work remotely. And also those which said on-site, which means you have to work in the office, was only 25%. And this was like 75% earlier, and that's come down to 25%. It has become 1/3. It has reduced like 70%. That's huge. So more companies are asking you to work remote than on-site. It saves, especially in the Western countries where visas are becoming difficult. They said, why should I fight with all this? Let me get the employees working wherever they are by just asking them to work remotely. Having said that, this is a book that I read about 10 years back. Scott Berkin, if you haven't read, he was earlier a project manager at Microsoft, a wonderful book. He has also written a new book today, this year, about designing. You should look at his, read his books. This one is a very fascinating book. This he wrote about in 10 years back, 2020 or 2011, where he worked for a year as a project manager for the company that powers WordPress. Automatic is the company's name. And even that time, this company didn't have offices. They had just had one small satellite office in San Francisco. But all their work, they had employees working remotely across 18 countries, if I remember right. And all of them were communicating through what those days they had their IRCs and pre-Slack tools and all that. And Scott Beckham wanted to learn how this company functions. So he worked for them for a year with the explicit mandate that he'll write a book. And that's the book, Year Without Pants. And that's a familiar theme, all of us this year, right? All of us, there are memes that talk about people not wearing trousers. They are just in the shorts and things like that, because you only get to see your upper half of your body in video calls like this one. But the joke aside, that company has made it powerful. WordPress is powering about 30% of the web. There are like millions of websites that are running on WordPress, and they are able to work completely remote, even in 2011. And think what they could have been doing in the last 10 years. This is a native company that knows how to take advantage of remote working. So read that book. You'll have lots of points on how you can make remote working more effective and learn from that for your own companies. But the point is, we saw remote working and working from your home is a theme that has happened in the pandemic. But is it here to stay? The answer is emphatic yes. Companies like Twitter and Facebook have said it's very unlikely they will ask their people to come back or force people to come back to office. They'll be welcome at some point after the pandemic, but they are going to give the option of people to be working entirely from their houses. Even companies like Shipsy and Tata Steel, if you think of a company that emphasizes that symbolizes the old economy like Tata Steel, they are saying those people who are having a white collar job, and I think probably they define the job roles, they can work from their house remotely forever. They don't need to come back to the offices. And that is the trend. And that also means this is here to stay. So you have to start adapting. Please don't wait that this remote working will go and I can go back to those offices. Probably those days are not coming. People will be going back to office, but those numbers will be very, very small. You will be having the options to work remote. So if you're looking for a job, if you're looking for change, start looking out for a job that allows you to work remotely so that you don't need to relocate every time. And I was curious. Those were data that I studied from papers and all. I interviewed before this talk in the last couple of weeks. My friends who are working in the large IT service companies in India. And this is the kind of the consensus I got from talking to a few of them. They're saying about 1/3 of the jobs are going to be posted entirely for remote working. They're going to be posting these jobs and saying, we are going to be taking jobs for remote. For tax purposes, you will be allocated to a Pune office or a Bangalore office or a Bombay office, so on and so forth. But then you will be assured you can work remotely. You don't need to come. And this may not be for all the jobs, but about 1/3 of the jobs are going to be kept for remote. And companies are not doing it for altruistic reasons also. They are saying, I find it so difficult, Venkat, to find employees, say, in the NCR region or in Bombay alone. I need to tap pan-India. There are a lot of developers in small towns like Udupi or Madurai or Lucknow. Lucknow is not a small town, but from the metro's perspective, IT perspective, those towns or cities we haven't heard of, but those are the cities that are going to give you the new software development people that are going to power India. And they are not going to relocate to metros, not all of them. And we don't want them in the metros also, right? Why should their quality of life be affected by traffic and all that? And the cost. Everybody comes to Bangalore. Remember the cost of apartments in Bangalore. So this 30 to 40% of people post-pandemic are also going to work entirely remote. You don't believe me? Open your browser now, go to Naukri and search for remote jobs. Naukri has a special option now, which actually says to search for jobs that are remote only. And that's not only with Naukri, Monster and Indeed and all the job sites that you go are going to be having this remote only option. And that's the way you can tap into these talents. We'll switch gear. Now I have come to the third part of my talk. If you recall, I said 4. Last one is how do you keep up with these times? What do you do to stay ahead in this game for the next 20 years? The third part, of course, is the technology, AI, automation. We'll see some examples. This is a very interesting image that I saw in Economist rather. It shows a robot picking up a cup of cola or a chocolate pretty deftly. It's not dropping it at all, but the arms it's probably sharp and the cola is pouring down. It's like Operation Success, the patient dead. The robot is able to pick it up, but then it's applying too much pressure probably. The other way of looking at it is an engineering perspective. You haven't designed the cup strong enough for the robots to pick. But then if you design the cup for the robots, can humans handle it? Those are questions that will come up. But anyway, today these tools that automation and AI are not as stupid as this. These tools are really good and they are delivering, which we'll see in the next few slides. Low code, no code. This is an area that I've been doing a lot of work in the last 1-2 years. I've been studying from Power Apps to Zoho creators to AWS Honeycodes and Google App Sheets and all that. There are a lot of low code and no code solutions that are available now. And why are they so? If you think about it, why are they so? Each company that was surveyed by Okta Inc. and it was published in a Microsoft site also, that said there are at least 129 applications, each company on an average, and some of them have over 200 applications. These are even small companies, small and medium companies. And to develop each one of these applications, either internally or by professional folks outside, costs about $45,000 per application. That's a lot of money. That's about half a year's salary for a qualified engineer in the US, a software engineer. So about 200 apps. How are you going to develop them? How are you going to manage them? And how are you going to update them with latest frameworks coming up and so on and so forth? That's where low code, no code really comes in, because you can, if you go back to my earlier slide about several million graduates coming out of Indian colleges, all of them are bright students. Only 0.9 are taking computer science, but all those millions of graduates are smart. And if you can empower them to write software, they can solve their business problems themselves. That is where low code and no code comes in. And if these people are being able to be trained on, say, something like Power Apps, they can write their business applications themselves. Does it make them a software engineer? Does it make them a software developer? Certainly a software developer. I'm not sure about the software engineering part, but they are ones who are developing software, so they are software developers. And that's the way to go. You will find more and more people developing software for their own use, for their small business use and all that. Let's take a look at this. This is the Codex from OpenAI. Many of you might have seen this demos. If you've not, just go to openai.com and look at OpenAI, the Codex demo. It's a small 5 minutes video. It's really fascinating. You should look at it. And this is the ones we have all heard about, the GPT-3 NLP models that was trained by OpenAI and released, which could do a lot of intelligent understanding of language and even generation of text and prose and all that. Using that model, they had trained it on a little bit amount of code, and they found it was working for source code also. And they improved on it. They gave it millions and millions of lines of code, millions of data points to be trained on, and they trained on it. And this is the demo. It's not out. It's not available. It's only available for limited people for usage. But the video talks about this example. You just add this image of a rocket ship, and you give the URL in which the image is present. You're not writing any piece of code. There's only English here. If you do this, you get this output. Okay, and you see the code on the right-hand side. Add this image of a rocket ship. We gave that. That's the comment or the instruction. We gave it to the system Codex, and it was able to come up with the output. Write it in JavaScript. Var rocket ship is equal to document.create element and all that. Basically, and it's output the image. And in the next step, we said make it smallish. We don't say make it smaller. We said make it be smallish. Kind of a weird English, grammatically probably not correct, but then it understood and it gave the output of the code to make that image as 100 pixel by 100 pixel. Next, we said crop it circularly, and then it gave the border radius is equal to 50%. Okay, I'm not taking a dig at Windows 11 rounded corners and all that. I use it. I love it. But this is just a sample that Codex have got it. Okay, so and you see the output on the top. Crop it circularly. It's able to do. And this whole demo kind of develops this small thing into actually a small game that you can kind of play with. It's pretty interesting. Just by giving comments, you're able to generate a working piece of code that you can take it and use it elsewhere. Does it mean software engineers are not going to be having any jobs? It's not so, as we'll see. This is a kind of a tool that is going to improve your productivity. It's not about taking jobs away. It is actually improving you, generate more code, write more applications, make you very productive. That's an example from Codex. And these tools are not perfect, obviously, and they are going to take times. Probably my estimate in the next 10 years, by 2030, these tools will be really, really good. And we'll be wondering, or at that 2030 time, we'll not be writing code manually entirely. Majority of the code that we write would have been generated by a software system like Codex, and they would have grown exponentially. Remember, AML doesn't grow every year incrementally. They grow exponentially. And that's a graph we humans actually have a problem understanding. These become so, don't have your experience of your Siris and Google Assistants not so great affect what will happen in this area. The way the software generation, code generation tools are going to develop in the next 10, 20 years is going to be phenomenal. Okay. And this is the example by Codex. It's not perfect, just to show that. Just the comment we wrote. Add 3 to y, then subtract 4 from both x and w. There are 4 variables. So you wanted 3 to be added to y. 4 subtracted from both x and w. That means you have touched 3 variables. Then return the product of all the 4 numbers as your return value. But if you see the Python code that was generated, there are 2 things that was missed. Right? It was not multiplying all the 4 numbers, which is what we wanted. It was only multiplying z and w. We actually wanted to multiply x and y as well. Okay, and it was not subtracting 4 from W as well. So 2 things it missed. And again, these are very, very early days. So the point is, these tools are not perfect today, but they're going to become so perfect that by 2030 or 2040, majority or almost all the code that we write will be generated by systems like this. This is Microsoft GitHub's CoPilot service. It's available today. I got access to my, couple of hours back, I got access to my technical preview. I'll try to show you live in the next slide. But this is how this tool works. This CoPilot, whatever I said about Codex earlier, is true for CoPilot, because CoPilot is based on the OpenAI Codex model that Microsoft has licensed from OpenAI. And they've trained it on millions and millions of open source projects on GitHub. These are not private repositories. There were rumors on Microsoft is taking code from my private repositories, nothing like that. These are only public repositories that it has used to train. And it's not reproducing a code snippet. Remember, it's not like a find, copy, paste. It's not autocomplete. It's actually using those code to learn and generate this. Whatever code that CoPilot generates is your own copy. It's your own license. You can use it for whatever you want. There's nothing you need to license it from Microsoft or GitHub or anything, because that piece of code has not been generated ever before for anybody else. It's uniquely generated for you on the data points that you have given, but based on millions and millions of lines of code that it has read from and trained on the Codex model. So how does it work? This is an example. Okay, let me try to do the live coding. I'll take the risk of doing this. Okay, let me go to my Visual Studio Code. Hopefully, I guess it's visible for you. Okay, so let's take it out. Let's write a comment. Okay, let me say subtract 2 numbers. Okay, and return the result. If you notice, I didn't type and return the. Okay. Let me switch. I think it's not. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So if you notice, the return result actually auto-completed for me. Let's do that, and let's see what comes here. This is what you shouldn't be experimenting with. It should be actually popping up with the CoPilot recommendations for me. Okay. Let's try it again one last time. Yeah. If you see, it's able to produce this code for me at every stage. It's giving me those recommendations, right? It's a bit finicky. Earlier in the morning when I tried, it actually generated this piece of code automatically for me. But even now you can get the idea of it. Let's try to try one more. Let's use this, whatever I had. Okay, read a file and return a list of lines. Okay, let's try that. Okay. Read a file, return the number of lines. In characters. Wow. In the file. Oh, it's giving me more choices. Okay. It does take a bit of time. Okay. Sometimes you need to wait. Yeah, now you see it. It's able to tell me the entire piece of code that I would have wanted. It's fascinating if you think about it. It doesn't everything correct. It has opened the file, read the number of lines. It doesn't given the number of characters, though. Maybe it will. Yeah, yes, it is showing. It takes a bit of time. It's not as fast as what you would have wanted. Yeah, but you get the idea. Basically, it's able to generate this. And as these tools become better and better, as more people start using it, you'll find these tools like CoPilot becoming really useful. Think about it. Most of the time when we want to write a piece of code, we don't know the syntax of something. How many times you would have opened a file in Python? It may not be. That's not what you're doing every day. You're just writing Python for the day. You don't know how to open a file. You know the Python syntax, you know everything, but you don't know this syntax. You have to Google, pick up the source code, copy paste and all that. This is going to save you time, because there's nothing proprietary in the way you open a file or count number of lines in a Python code. Every Python developer is going to do that. So why do that repetitive task? Why don't you give it to the AI and ML that's powering CoPilot to do that job for you? And in this way, you're going to be having lesser bugs because these are the code that's probably been tested. So it's going to work better for you. So that's CoPilot. It's hot from the plate, as they say it, because only today morning, as I said, I got the access to the technical preview. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so what are the benefits for something like CoPilot? The benefits today, CoPilot benefits are it can convert your comments to code. You can do a data structure, say in JavaScript, and it can generate the entire function, that is to read and write those values that are available. It can generate it for you. It will autofill repetitive code, which we saw. It can also do the test. There are some tools, not only from Microsoft, but from others, which allow you to do the testing, both unit testing and functional testing, without you doing the bulk of the code. And it also provides you alternate approaches. If you have been used to writing or opening a file, like in this Python example, in one way, it would have provided you an alternate way, and you will be able to circle back between multiple ways in which you can open a file. You wouldn't have known those different types of code to open a file. Those would know. So you can pick up the best. And this will also avoid you missing out some important step, like not closing a file handle or improperly opening a file that you're not supposed to open because you had closed it earlier. Those kind of typical errors, or your SQL Server, SQL injection errors, all those are not going to happen because the code that is being generated has been learned from millions and millions of lines of code from millions of projects, and it's likely to be good. And it also have those tools that we look at in the testing will help you to identify problems in these code. So your code that you are now writing will be a lot more better. It's not only from Microsoft. There is a tool called Kite for Python. If you go to kite.com, this is a system they already have for the last couple of years, which does something like CoPilot, but not to the extent. This is more an autocomplete version. CoPilot takes it to the next level. But then today, if you want to use, you can try out Kite for Python. It's pretty interesting. Some of the large data types you want to handle, you want to manipulate them. Having something like Kite, I have found it to be really useful. You don't need to remember all the syntax in your head. There is also a project in Microsoft called CodeBERT. I'll give you links to these, or if you search Microsoft Research for CodeBERT, this actually tells you to not only complete code, it actually does a summary of your code, which is very useful, because when you're going through somebody else's code, we all know it's probably easier writing a new piece of code than to read somebody else's code. And especially, even if it's your code written 5 years back, to read it now and understand, you will find it really difficult. I write a blog for about 16, 17 years now, about 4,000 posts. I read my blog post written 10, 15 years back, and I wonder, because on some of the points that I've said there, it's not because they are great, it's because I don't remember many of them. Okay, so it's very difficult to go back the code or read somebody else's code. And this kind of summary tool, which will take your code and then summarize. In the second example at the bottom for the concatenate, this CodeBERT is able to take it and then give you a command, concatenate two arrays. It's not great, but it's very useful. Without reading all the lines of code and understanding what's happening, what is being incremented and counted and all that, you just get a summary. So you can understand this code a lot more faster. It is again not perfect today, but then my point is, this is the direction in which we are moving. Code is being generated, code is being summarized, your code is being explained to you. These are where you are able, if you're able to see a theme here, I'll be happy. The theme is, these are the tools that are augmenting your capabilities, improving your productivity. There's this tool from Microsoft AI Labs. Again, the link is at the bottom, called Sketch to Code. You just sketch in your whiteboard and it's able to generate HTML for you on the right-hand side. And it also tells you the model, why it predicted that. It's very interesting to learn. And if you're working on image visioning and computer vision and all that, this sample is very good to understand why it's able to predict what you have drawn as a box, as a image and all that. Very interesting. And it's also saying its confidence level, typical computer vision stuff. And on the right-hand side, it's generate HTML. Think about these tools becoming better and better. They'll be able to generate XAML. They'll be able to generate React for you. Already startups are working on those things. So that's the way in which going. So if you want to write an MVP, you use your code generator tools. You use these tools like that. By the evening, you will be able to have an MVP. Again, remember, I'm not saying there will be no software development. It will give you a head start. Again, you have to take that code and improve it yourself. There's a lot of work that has to be done on top of it, but you won't be starting from a blank page. That's my point. These tools, remember, are not replacing your job. These tools are going to be augmenting your jobs. That's why I said by 2030, 2040, the amount of code that you write yourself manually will be very less. Most of them will be computer generated, but you are the ones who are supplying it with the intelligence. This is a thing from Google. Very interesting. You should check it out. There's a video on YouTube also of it. I found it really interesting. You all to video. You give it a URL of a page, a blog or a news article with images preferably, and it's able to generate a video out of it. Kind of a summary, like how the CodeBERT in Microsoft example, research example, was able to summarize the code, was able to summarize a web page and into a shorter video. Google is an ad company, so they want you to generate ads. They want you to have video ads, and they want to help you to generate those advertisement banners. But at the end of the day, look at it. It's able to, the system is able to figure out, the AI system is able to figure out what is important in this particular page, and it has also reassembled the elements. From a landscape, it is able to make it into portrait. It's able to figure out what is the important text. It is not doing the smaller text in the page and all that. It's able to understand all this and able to generate a video. It's kind of a summary. The message that I see here is it's able to summarize a web page into something that is more graphical, more easily able to be understandable by you. This is a tool by Microsoft Lab again, called Code Effect. You can go and see it. It's learned from lots of open source projects. And if you give it a source code in, say, GitHub, it's able to tell you that these are the areas, these are the files that are having problems. It's very interesting. It's not only a static analyzer tools that we are commonly using in your job. It's something more than that. It's able to learn from the bugs that others had in their code and able to warn you that your code could be having those problems. And it's very interesting. And it also classifies your bugs into high-risk bugs, low-risk bugs, and so on and so forth. There's a third-party company, a startup called Functionize. You should check it out. They are having a product. If you give it a web page, it's able to tell problems in the CSS. It uses computer vision. It has multiple other things. But I found it interesting, the computer vision part. If you see, the text that I see in this web page is instant graph savings on the top nav bar. But actually it should be big savings. The CSS is doing a bad job here. Probably I'm hiding, or the big savings is hidden by instant savings, or these should be two different things. But the point is the big savings is not visible. This, if you don't physically see this page or a human sees it, you won't be able to identify this problem. But Functionize, it's able to do it because it combines computer vision with AI models and able to look at multiples of CSS that are available out there and then do a recommendation for you. These are the kind of tools that are even now available. Lastly, before we close this section and move to the last part of my talk, Q Sharp, today in the morning, there was a beautiful talk on quantum, on exposition and superposition and quantum bits in the same track. If you have listened to it, you will find this simple. I'm not going to be explaining you, but the point is there is a piece of Q Sharp code on the right-hand side, left-hand side, which to me looks like C Sharp. So, but it is Q Sharp because it is managing on quantum. On the right-hand side, you see is a quantum computer that Microsoft has got it at extremely low temperature. Probably it's like -100, -200 degrees Celsius or something ridiculous like that. And that's a quantum computer, and you're having quantum bits, and you're able to write a code to generate a random bit. And the code, if you go look at it in the Microsoft website for Q Sharp, it'll actually go to generate a quantum number, random number by quantum. That random number, today we know the random numbers maybe at certain point in time if you're not careful and certain conditions and all that. But with this, the random number is guaranteed to be random and unique because it is based on quantum superpositions. Okay, so because the scale in which these operate are again very, very large. Those are going to be coming in the next 10-20 years. By 2030, or at least if not 2040, we will all be using quantum. We won't be running quantum computers in our houses. It doesn't work that way. In the clouds or somewhere, quantum computers will be running and we'll be writing programs. Not again, remember, those of you who have a fairly bit of understanding of quantum, you'll know quantum computers will not be replacing our traditional binary computers. Binary computers will continue to work, digital computers, and quantum computers will be doing those critical cryptographic and random numbers, those very, very key part. and your digital computers will continue to do the jobs which we are familiar with. But this is also coming in the next 10, 20 years. So the kind of summarizing the third part of my talk, AI-based tools will help you improve your quality dramatically. You can't give the excuse that I'm moving fast or I'm failing fast. No, even if you are moving fast, companies and businesses will expect you to be without errors, because the tools will be able to warn you that you're going to fail. So no more move fast and fail fast in the next 10, 20 years. That's the trend. Every piece of code that you write will be expected to run properly. And if your organization follows pair programming, your partners will be assigned to you by AI systems, which will see, oh, A and B are writing similarly, so that's a best productivity to move them, both pair them into pair programming, or move A and C, who are having completely different way of writing code, to be put into the same project, because that way the project will get the maximum innovation. Scrum backlogs, which your managers are assigning today, will be done by AI. The managers will not be assigning those tasks to you anymore. Again, I'm just throwing up some of the ways in which typical software development will be impacted. Some of them are already happening, and most of them are going to happen in the next decade or so. And these systems will also be able to identify duplication, so that two people writing the same piece of code in the organization, which is always has been a kind of a want in computer systems. You don't need to do that. Systems will be able to spot it for you and tell you. And these are some of the links. That's beautiful. If you have access to IEEE magazines, go to IEEE Software July, August 2020 issue. It has a whole issue talking about intersection of AI and software engineering. Some of the points in this talk has been taken from that as well. And the Microsoft portions are from the link that I'm referring there, called Research Collection of Creating the Future of Software Development by Microsoft Research. Lastly, how to stay relevant. This is what I call cola. As I said, it's not your Coca-Cola that you drink. It's called what I call as the continuous learning, and then augmenting your skills. It's very clear you have to continuously learn this world. The next 10, 20 years, if one thing that's going to be constant and for sure is going to be, you got to be continuously learning. And these AI tools are going to be helping you to augment your skills. Okay. So we'll see next few slides, and probably, hopefully, I can take one or two questions. Work involved in software development today. There are three large portions that people talk in the software engineering side. Business requirement, customer study. Today, that takes about 50% of the time. If you're not doing 50% of your time in business requirement and customer study, something is wrong. Okay, today that's the number. Only 20% is done in coding, testing, deployment. Architecture, design, mapping requirements is about 30. The typical software architect role, etc. 50, 30, 20. This is what is happening today, and this is kind of an ideal number. Again, each organization will have different. If you're writing something at the kernel level, this number will be completely skewed towards coding, because business requirements in a kernel development is very, very less. But the point is, this is what typical software today has, and this is going to change. Not change with coding taking more or something like that. When I say upside down, coding is going to become even more lesser, because the system is going to generate the code, like we saw with your Codex, etc. Testing is also going to be automated. AI is going to do deployment. You will never ever, in the next 10 years, if I can be sure of one thing, you will never deploy your code anywhere. There is no such concept of you deploying your code, because the deployment would have become so complex that your code will be running in different computers, different clouds, with humongous amount of infrastructure, scaffolding and all that, and fault tolerance, error, security and all that. Manually, you won't be able to deploy code. Only systems will be able to do that. Okay, so it will become even more lesser, and the time that you save in the architecture, in the coding, will be taken over by business requirement. I call this talking to the customer. That's why I have the image at the left. The time that you save by these coding and the testing job that you do will be spent in talking to the customer, empathizing with them, understanding their business requirement, thinking. We don't, with your TikToks and YouTube, we don't do much of thinking, but you'll be forced to think. You will be forced to innovate. That's where you will spend most of your time. And two things that you can do. One is, there is no lifelong jobs anymore. If you're thinking you can join, say, TCS and retire from TCS in 30 years, or Infosys or Wipro or Microsoft or any company like that, forget it. There's not going to be lifelong jobs. You might be with the same company, but you may not be doing the same job. That's gone in any industry, more so in software industry. If you're starting as a developer or with, say, C#, I can assure you that in the next 5 years, 10 years, you are neither going to be a software developer nor going to write C#. Okay, it's going to change because that's how our system is changing so rapidly, and it's only going to accelerate. There's a beautiful example. A friend of mine talks about carrier being in auto drive versus sports mode. You have your Audis and the BMWs having auto drive, which we are all familiar. You don't need to switch the gears, it automatically switches. And the sports mode, it's not manual mode, it's called sports mode, where it gives you the power of manual mode, the control, but also gives you the flexibility and the comfort of auto drive. So it's a combination. So you will have to start, you will be coding, you will be writing code, or you will be generating software, you will be testing, but then these systems will be augmenting it, and you will be in kind of a sports mode. So that's what I call as the manual plus auto drive thing. You'll be able to continuously learn, unlearn, and learn. Be prepared for it. Last week, I joined on a course on Udacity to learn a new programming language just for the sake of it. Otherwise, I won't be able to talk to the youngsters. When I'm interviewing them, most of them are probably years ahead of me in many of these tools. If I have to keep pace with them, which is very, very difficult, I have to first unlearn that a lot of things that didn't work 10 years doesn't mean they won't work now. So a lot of unlearning, and you have to become a person of gathering of information than just memorizing things. And as I said, you will be talking to customers more, you'll be empathizing with them, you'll be thinking, which means apart from software, you also have to understand business, marketing, sales, sociology, psychology, and all that. Lastly, be truly global, because that's the world we are getting into. Remote working, if you're working for a company, say in Ireland, sitting from India, you have to really understand their culture. And for that, the best way is today reading books. There's a lot of movies also available in Netflix and Amazons. Best way to understand a culture now, easier way, is to go to one of these OTTs and watch those movies. Okay, so recapping, the job market, it's fantastic, but it's not going to stay this way. Work from home, those of you are worried whether it will be the same way, I can assure you it's going about 30 to 40% of the job are going to remain remote even after the pandemic. We saw how the AI tools, whether it is Codex or CoPilot or Futura, all of them are going to augment your skills and improve your productivity so that you can write more software, more applications. And lastly, for you to stay relevant in these times in the next 10, 20 years, it's very important you take up what I call as COLA, continuous learning, and augmenting with these AI and ML tools to your capabilities. So thank you. Thanks to our partners, the publishers, Packet, DevPost, RSA, Fisher, and Mr. Karthikeyan. And also to all the communities and the community leaders who have participated. And if I'm permitted to take questions, I'll leave with this slide for you while if there are any questions. And if somebody in the organizer can relay it back to me, I can answer them. I leave you with this quote: let machines be machines, let humans be humans. What I mean by that, machines are very good when it comes to systems, process, testing, deployment, and all that. Leave it to machines. Humans are good in talking to people, connecting to people, understanding business, innovation. Let us do what we are good at and leave the machines to do what they are good at, and world will be peaceful. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Venkat. Some of the slides were threatening, and this one was amazing. Yeah, let machines be machines and let humans be humans. I think people are able to connect, and I see a lot of feedback. Not many questions, but a lot of feedback from many people. I think most audience really liked and enjoyed what you really shared. And please take a moment to share your feedback on this particular content from Venkat. I'm just leaving the link right here with your unique code. And if you submit this one, you would stand a chance to get awesome giveaway plus an Azure certification voucher from the AzConf. And once again, thank you so much, Venkat. Anything in the last moment? Anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Elias, and all the organizers. It's not easy to put forward a conference like this at this scale. Just to go through the number of sessions was like, it took me a couple of minutes at least. So fantastic conference. And for all the listeners, have a wonderful AzConf for the next 3 days. There is a lot to learn. And let's ensure we learn more than the machines. And lastly, that's my contacts at Venkatrangan. Just keep the dialogue going. I really like to hear your feedback on the thoughts that you think. Am I overestimating things, or am I underestimating? What's the trends you are seeing in your office? I like to really see it. Thank you once again.